All right, guys, welcome back to the To Be Fit podcast. I am super excited to have someone who really needs no introduction in the fitness world, but to some of you listeners at home who may not be familiar, Jordan Syatt. Jordan was former coach to Gary Vee for a while. He's now runs Syatt Fitness. He has an online site in which he runs a community of people who are looking to move better, feel better, get stronger, lose body fat. And more specifically, I'm super excited to have him on here because he does it in a way that is honest. It is respectful. There is no gimmicks. It's straightforward, good information. So Jordan, I know you're a super busy dude. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm very excited. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Basically, let's go over a little bit of the history. How did you get to where you are now? So, we don't need to spend a ton of time on training with Gary and things like that. I know from your start in fitness to where you are now, how did you kind of get there? How'd that lead into working with Gary and then branching off and kind of doing what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I'll try and keep it brief. If I ramble, just tell me to shut up.
Sure.
Basically, I grew up in outside Boston in Massachusetts, and I'm a short, bald Jewish guy, and so my whole family is very short Jewish people, and my mom didn't want my brother and I to get picked on in school, or if we did get picked on, she wanted us to be able to defend ourselves. So she put us in wrestling at a very young age. So like at 8 years old, I started wrestling. I remember she walked in the living room and, I was like 7 at the time, 7 or 8. And she was like, I'm going to put you two in wrestling. And I remember I looked up at her, and the only wrestling that I knew was like WWE wrestling.
Right.
So I remember
you were getting out the steel chairs. You were ready to go.
Yeah. I literally said, I was like, you want me to hit someone with a chair? And she was like, no, you idiot, like Olympic style wrestling, which I didn't know what that was, but she put us into it and I immediately fell in love with it. And I was pretty good at it. I was terrible in school, but I was pretty good athletically. And so I started doing that at 8. And then I ended up making varsity as a freshman when I got to high school. And then I was pretty good from a technique perspective and endurance perspective, but my strength wasn't where it needed to be. As a freshman on varsity, 14 years old, going up against 16, 17, 18-year-olds, there's a huge strength differential. So I started trying to dive into strength training. I found a gym a couple of towns over from me in a town called Newton, Massachusetts. And basically I wrote them an email and I said, I'll take the trash out. I'll clean the floors. I'll do whatever you need me to do. Just let me come and learn from you. And that's how I got into strength training. And I fell in love with it. I worked at that gym all through high school and I became a strength coach. And I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. So I continued wrestling through high school. After that, I started more going into powerlifting, but I knew I just wanted to coach people. And my first one-on-one client at that gym, his name was Fred. He was 68 years old. I didn't start coaching him until I was like 16. They didn't just throw me into coaching people at 14. So I was there for a couple of years. And then I'll never forget, Fred's main goal was he just wanted to be able to pick up his grandson without hurting his shoulders because he had some rotator cuff issues. And at that time, I was 16. And all I wanted to do was be good at wrestling and look good naked like that. And I just thought that's what everyone wanted. So for him to be like, listen, I don't care if I lose body fat. I don't care. I just want to be able to pick up my grandson without worrying about my shoulders. That's when I got really excited about coaching because I got more excited to help Fred achieve his goals than I was to achieve my own goals. And that's what really got me involved in coaching and what let me know I was so passionate about it. And that's what I've been doing ever since, man. I started doing online stuff in college. I just made a website in July of 2011. I didn't know that an online business was possible. I just was like following my mentors in the industry and the people who I looked up to, Eric Cressy, Dan John, Mike Robertson, Joel Jamieson, all these like really OGs in the fitness space. I just made a website and started writing articles on it with the goal of helping people. And I was doing it from my dorm room in college. And I'll never forget, like after like 2 years of writing articles, and the only person who saw my articles were my mom. Like I got like 20 views a day on my website on a good day, and 18 of those were my mom. So like all out of nowhere, like 2 years after writing articles every single week with nothing, I got a woman from Brazil saying, "Hey, how much does it cost to do online coaching with you?" And I was like, I have no idea. So I just wrote, I was like, I don't know, $300. And then long story short, she ended up, I saw $300 in my PayPal account, and she was my first ever online coaching client, and it sort of just took off from there. So after a few years of that, ended up coaching Gary Vaynerchuk for a few years, which was amazing. And that just continued to help grow my online coaching business. And now I've got a daughter, another one on the way. God willing. And my wife and I and family, we live in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw the announcement of the second, that's when I reached out. I was like, man, I got to first congratulate you, and then second, I got to talk to this guy about being a dad, which is what we'll get to as well. Like a couple of things to touch on. Like I had similar background. I currently still work with a good amount of junior high, high school, and we even have some Division I college wrestlers, nationals that start next week. And it's my favorite sport. I was never at that level. These guys are the kids that I do their strength training or nutrition for now. But it's a great sport to be a part of, right? You learn that humility. You learn like it's nobody else's fault but yours. You can't blame the left tackle or the quarterback for throwing a bat. Like it's just you out there. And similarly, like when I first started working and coaching with clients, it was like, well, I compete in powerlifting. Like that was my background as well. It was like, we got a box squat. You got to sit back and push your knees out. And I was like, had no clue what, I was like, well, this is how I do it. So that's all I know. And that's what I'm going to start coaching you. And then kind of had similar mentors in terms of like, not on the personal level that I'm sure that you had with Eric and those guys, but those were people that when I was in college were writing for all the major sites. And that's where I was fortunate enough to get that information and try to learn from them and grow and move on as fast as we can. So one thing that I like about your work is the fitness industry it's still to this day is kind of the Wild West, right? Like anybody can go on, do or say anything. And, as long as they look good, they seem to have credibility. That it's no different, men, women, it's all the same. What I like about your stuff is that you've managed to cut through all of that. And like you said, how long since your first video back in college?
July of 2011. My first YouTube video was in 2012.
Yeah, so we're looking at 12 years later to where you're at now and doing it like the right way, right? With good information to help regular people. What kind of kept you, because I'm sure like obviously 12 years is not a short amount of time, right? What was kind of your inspiration? What helped you to kind of keep your head down and keep plowing along and not give in to just like, well, you know what? I'm just going to do what all these other guys are doing. And I'm going to sell 3-week quick fixes to this, that, or the other thing. What was your kind of motivation for going about it the way that you have?
So there's a lot there. I think number one is I surrounded myself with people who weren't doing that. I'll never forget. This is a funny quote I bring up. So when I interned with Eric Cressy, I'll never forget this. I forget how it was brought up. I think I asked him something to the effect of like, why haven't you started selling supplements? Because like he could make an insane amount of money doing that, especially back then. Like his online presence was wild and he was like, it was insane. And his response was, you've sold out when you get into the supplement industry. And I'll just never, it's burned in my brain. It's like, you've sold out because like, and there are some people who can do it well, but it's an iffy world to be in. It's so unregulated. It's so easy to play mental gymnastics and say, yeah, well, maybe this doesn't necessarily work, but maybe it's a placebo, so it's still worth selling it. It's just like, it's a lot of shady people in that world. So I think I put myself and I was accepted into a small circle of professionals who not only did I admire so much, but also they had such strong core values in terms of staying true to science and staying true to what was accurate, not selling out for money. Alan Aragon, Eric Cressy, like all these incredible leaders in the industry that's who I was fortunate enough to model myself after. And honestly, to be very blunt, if I had put myself in a different group of people, I think it would have been very easy for me to follow suit and sell out and do that stuff. So I really give credit to the people who I was fortunate enough to be allowed into their circle and teach me what was right.
Yeah, and for reference, for anybody who's not sure, like when we talk about Eric or Eric Cressy, he owns Cressy Sports Performance up in Boston. They have a second location down in, not sure where in Florida, but in Florida.
Jupiter, Florida.
And he's basically in Jupiter, Florida. He's the guy when it comes to when you're looking at elite level baseball training. I mean, I know they work with general population too, but his bread and butter is baseball. He's with the Yankees now, so that's who we're referencing when we talk about that. So moving forward, like, talking now to more specifically to clients or, is that who you're working with now? Like you're like the people that join your group, right? Are they mostly your general population, average everyday people just kind of looking to get in better shape?
Yeah, the vast majority are just regular, everyday people, moms, dads, husbands, wives, single people, whatever. They're not professional athletes. Now, every time I say that, there is always a couple people who are in my inner circle, and they're like, "I'm a pro athlete," or it's like, but they're like the outlier. They're less than 1% of the people. The vast majority are people who want to lose weight, get stronger, feel better. And the way that I frame it is they just want to incorporate fitness into their life. They don't want their life to revolve around fitness. So that's the vast majority of the people there.
So where is that group? Like, why do we continue to just, it's my own podcast. I was about to ask if I was allowed to curse, but like, where do we fuck this all up? Right. Like, so like, how do we continue to just fuck this up? Right. Like, where are people going wrong? Like, why, how and why do we make this so complicated? Like when you and I know as fitness professionals, there's a difference between simple and easy. Right. But where's the average person going wrong when they're looking, let's say it's a general person, because my gym, I own two gyms in New Jersey. They're personal training facilities. Our members are exactly what you described. They're not coming in and looking to necessarily set the world on fire and make fitness consume every bit of who they are, but they do want to make sure that they're healthy. They can take care of their family, keep up with their kids, have good energy. So, where do you see as the areas that these people are kind of just screwing it up or going wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with from the foundation. I think there's two main and very distinct areas where we start to see issues. I think we have the knowledge side of it, which is can be a main issue, and then we have the application side of it. And they're two distinct things and two distinct entities. And I think a lot of coaches sort of mesh them together, which is a mistake. So the way that I explain the knowledge side is we'll use cigarettes as an example. Cigarettes are interesting because that's an example of basically everybody knows cigarettes are bad for you. Like there's like on the box, there's a skull and crossbones saying these are going to kill you. So it's not a knowledge issue with cigarettes. And with some fitness and nutrition stuff, it's not a knowledge issue. It would be more of an application issue. For example, if you took 100 people and you have a cheeseburger in one hand, an apple in the other hand, and you say, which one's better for you? 100 people are going to say the apple's better for you, unless they're fucking carnivore. But either way, like it's stupid. The vast majority of people are saying apple's better for you. So they understand fruits are really good. Maybe we should keep processed food to a minimum. So they understand that. So from that perspective, I would say we would go more towards the application side, which I'll talk about in a second. But then there's another aspect of knowledge that I've found is getting worse and worse and worse as more and more information becomes available on social media and online. When I was getting into fitness, and I'm assuming I know you as well, to find high quality science-based information, it was challenging. It was very difficult. We had to go to the library or like actually go onto PubMed, or we had to like go like into research journals and read it out. We at some point we could get some books, but like you had to read long form content, books, long form articles. It was much more the barrier to entry to science-based information was far greater. Whereas now you go on Instagram and I'll have a post saying you can eat fruit without worrying about anything. And the next post will be someone saying fruit's going to make you fat because it has sugar. And so now it's a very convoluted world with access to information that appears science-based is overwhelmingly easy to come by. And contradictory information shows up on your feed over and over and over and over and over. And it becomes very difficult to understand who knows what they're talking about and who's just trying to sell you something and doesn't necessarily know what they're talking about. So I think the knowledge issue and the overwhelming ease of access to potentially or seemingly science-based information is skewing people, and it's creating a very difficult environment for people to know what's true and what's not true. That I think is one of the main problems right now. The other problem, and potentially a slightly bigger problem, is the application side, because the truth of the matter is everything works as long as you stick with it. And so, yes, you want to find what's sustainable and something you can stick to, but the biggest problem that I see people having is they just give up so fast. They try something and they quit. And maybe it's because it wasn't sustainable. Usually I find it's partly because it's not sustainable, but mostly because they just are impatient and they feel like it's not working after a day, 3 days, a week, and then they just give up altogether. They have one quote unquote bad meal, they miss one workout, whatever it is, they go on vacation and they're like, well, I ruined my progress. And then they just stop altogether for 6 months, a year, 3 years, and then they pick it back up later. So I think the not sticking with it part, the application part, is the single most destructive aspect, which makes it the most difficult for people, but also can't ignore the knowledge side as well.
So from the knowledge side, you're saying I can't reference my own blog posts as scientific literature to prove my point.
So it's a wild statement, and I also wouldn't include Yahoo or even Google on that either.
Yeah, it's so how's the and then from the application standpoint, I completely agree, because the hard part is this, is that if it is sustainable, the results probably aren't going to come as fast, right? Because one of the more the common conversations that I have is like, listen, Brian, I know it works. And you're like, all right, well, tell me more about that. I just need to cut out carbs and do whatever. Okay. So the next question then is, well, why do you assume that works? Well, every time I do that, I lose weight. And it's like, over what time frame? It's like, well, the first week. And it's like, okay, so it works, right? And then their brain gets in this feedback loop of like, the last time I did this, I remember the scale going down. And then, the reason it didn't work is because I stopped. So now when I need something to start again, I know it works. It's cutting this out and then moving forward from there.
It's one thing that has stuck out to me is very interesting. You bring up a really good point. When you look at the brain activity of someone gambling, and especially among someone who's like addicted to gambling, the brain response to winning and almost winning is almost identical.
So you've been through the scarcity brain, right?
Yes.
Have you read that? Yeah, dude. Yeah. That's probably one of the better books on coaching, even though it has nothing to do with coaching in the world.
100%. So when you almost win, it's essentially like the same response as winning. So I see that the same thing happening with people who are like, well, I lost a lot of weight when I did keto. It's like, you did lose it, and then you gained it all back and more. So you lost. Like, that wasn't a win.
Yeah.
They're only focusing on when they lost the weight, but then completely forgetting about they gained it all back and more. So I don't know why you're using this as a justification for why this worked, because clearly it didn't. If it worked, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right. Exactly. Well, then why are we here?
Exactly. So that for me is when people say, like, I had someone today, literally they posted, they were like, I've lost 2 pounds in 5 weeks. What am I doing wrong? I'm like, what do you mean? You're down 2 pounds in 5 weeks. It's like, you've created this arbitrary idea of how quickly you're supposed to lose weight. Maybe you're basing it off of someone else at the office. Maybe you're basing it off of previously how quickly you lost weight when you were ridiculously restrictive, but you're down 2 pounds in 5 weeks. Like, imagine if you kept that going. In 10 weeks, you'd be down 4 pounds. If we're keeping the same rate, in 15 weeks, you'd be down 6 pounds. And like, you just keep adding this up. At the end of a year, you've lost a significant amount of weight that then you can keep off in a very sustainable way. Like you said, a sustainable rate is a slower rate, and it's not going to be as fast, but it will be something that you can enjoy much more and sustain for the rest of your life.
That's the question that we end up leading with in any sort of new consultative process with nutrition, because everybody thinks that they know exactly what it takes, or that I can do it, right? It's like Dan John used to talk about that. Like, people would just come in and be like, no, when I put my mind to it, like, there's no stopping me. And it's like, well, turn that on then, I guess. Like, what are you here for? Like, yeah. But trying to understand, like, why, like, hey, if you want this result, nothing's for free. Everything costs something. Mm-hmm. If you want this to happen in 6 weeks, we probably could do that. But are you going to go and give up having ice cream with your kids maybe once a week? Are you going to give up having alcohol at any point, essentially? Mm-hmm. Like, these are all ways in which you can make these things maybe go a little bit faster. Can you work out 6 or 7 times a week? And for the average person that I think probably would either join your group or that I end up working with in one of our facilities, they can't. And then so the expectations are completely unrealistic, right? Correct. So when we talk to people, it's like, listen, if your daughter is getting married in 2 months and you're like, Brian, I screwed this up. I know what we're going to do for the next 8 weeks might not be realistic, but I need to get my shit together for this. All right, then I got you, but this is how we're going to go about it. But if
Hmm.
you're just like, I need to learn how to do this so that I potentially never need you again, well, that's a much different tool at that point.
Completely agree. Yeah. And I actually think you bring up a great point. There are some coaches who they would be like, no, I'm not going to work with someone if they want to lose weight for my daughter's wedding. And it's like, listen, if you want, I'm here to help you achieve your goals. If you want to lose it very quickly for this event, cool. And my job is to help you do it safely. But
Sure.
if you're trying to do it for the rest of your life and you're trying to make this like something that you don't want to ever have to diet again, then this is going to be a very different approach.
Yeah. And the question is going through those, those PN precision nutrition type questions of like, hey, is this a 10 out of 10 habit that we can do right now?
Hmm.
I think it's like a 7. All right. Well, then we're not doing that right now. Like we're going to
Yep.
focus on something else. And I think like, I don't know how long ago you were doing that with your content, but whenever you do your, for those of you that might not follow Jordan, every once in a while, we'll kind of do these like mini cuts, right? Like,
Hmm.
hey, been kind of not doing something for a while, time to tighten it up. Or when you were making weight for jujitsu, it was, hey, I'm going to show you what progress looks like.
Hmm.
And yeah, look, it was a tenth of a pound for, and then it was a tenth of a pound. But if you do that for 100 days in a row, like that's significant. So that's why I enjoyed seeing you do that type of content, because it's eye opening for people to see like, this isn't, you're not losing 5 pounds a week.
Right. Yeah. And in regard to those mini cuts, I usually do like one a year. And it's actually been really good, not just for me, but I think for people who followed me for a long time, because I essentially decided to do a mini cut when I reached the upper end range of my like maintenance weight. And I think a lot of people, when they think of their maintenance weight or any weight, even their low, they have this weird idea that they're going to stay that exact weight every day. And it creates a very warped perception, number one, of how weight fluctuates and how your weight is supposed to be. But for me, I have like a 10-pound range of my maintenance. Now, I have friends and colleagues who they have more of a 5-pound range. They're a little bit more dialed in. For me, at this point in my life, like I don't want to be super dialed in with my nutrition at all. Like I've got a daughter, God willing, and I got another one on the way. We're getting a dog on Saturday, like run a
Nice.
business, like got a lot going on. And so it's like I want the freedom to be able to have a bonfire outside and have some s'mores, go over my calories and not really worry about it. So I have this 10-pound weight range between like, and I'm short again, so I'm like 5'4", so like 145 to 155 is my range. If I go below 145, I don't feel good. My energy goes down, strength goes down, libido goes down. So like I'll increase my calories. Usually that's not a problem to increase my calories. If I start getting above like 155, that's when I'm like, all right, I've got to rein it in. And so I'll do a mini cut like once a year for like 8 weeks. So it's like 2 months, usually during the summer, going at the end of summer, going into fall before the holidays. And so I'll go from like 155 to 145 or so. And then that's it for the year. And that's literally it. And then I slowly end up gaining it back throughout the year. And then I do it again. I repeat that process. And for me, that's been unbelievably helpful and comfortable because 2 months out of the year, I ate in a deficit. And then the rest, I'm just chilling and I get to gradually gain it back and then lose it again.
And I would assume that removes a lot of the anxiety of like what I need to be doing, right? You set these parameters. When this happens, I do this. If this other thing happens, I do that. So what's your first step like for someone? How did, like, when you're like, all right, I'm going to start this mini cut. What do you look to first?
So the first thing, and it's a great question, it's really important. My food choices stay the same year round. Like what I eat stays the same no matter what. Like I don't have dieting foods and regular foods. I think it's a huge mistake that people make. Because if you have dieting foods and then non-dieting foods, like you're setting yourself up for binge eating and over restriction, bad relationship with food. So all the foods stay the same. I try and focus on protein, whether it's chicken, turkey. I have salmon probably between 3 to 5 nights a week. I love salmon. It's just I don't like the term superfood, but if I was going to use the term superfood, I think salmon would be on that list. Just super high quality fats, high protein. So the majority of my food is whole, minimally processed foods. I actually feel very good with a significant amount of fat coming from whether it's salmon or whole eggs or olives, olive oil. I really enjoy a little bit of a higher fat, moderate carb, moderate protein diet, just for me personally, a little bit more like a Mediterranean diet style. So a lot of beans and lentils, legumes, all of that, nuts and seeds. Um, the main difference when I start a mini cut is I just track my calories and I just reduce the portion size. So it's the exact same foods, but slightly less. And that's it.
Mhm.
And I just make sure I'm hitting my calories. So oftentimes like when I'm not counting and when I'm in like that regular year, like the gaining phase, we'll call it, of like the slowly increasing, is my portion sizes are bigger. Or I'll like yesterday ran like at 5 in the afternoon, my wife had gotten some ice cream and she's like, it was key lime pie ice cream. And she was like, do you want one? I was like, yeah, I absolutely want one.
Mhm.
And like, I can have that without worrying about it or without like, cause I'm not tracking my calories. If I was tracking my calories, I'd probably be like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to have that today, or I would have that, but then have a little bit less at dinner, something along those lines. So it's just keeping track of my calories and slightly lower, reduced portion size.
How do you handle, because like the average person, right, when you explain it that simple, right, there was nothing complicated really there in what you just said, and their response is like, Jordan, like, come on, that's it, that's all you do, like, what's the real, like, no, tell me the real thing.
What supplements are you
Right.
taking?
Right. Like it's so funny to, just side note, right? That's why, and this is gonna be a big tangent, but one of my favorite stories in the Old Testament is about, I think it's in like Kings or Samuel or something like that. But anyway, there's this guy, he's a king, he's got everything. He's got this sickness. He's like, hey, like, go to the prophet and tell him to talk to God for me. And like, what do I got to do to fix this? And the guy's like, all right, listen, I talked to God. He said, just go wash in the river over there. You'll be good. And he's like, nah, I'm not doing that. He's like, what do you mean? He's like, it's too simple. He's like, no, like, there's got to be more complicated than that. Like, and his response is like, so if I would have told you, I'm obviously very paraphrasing here and making up into a more interesting story. If I would have told you to like stand on one leg, spin in a circle, hang garlic around your neck and, sacrifice 7 animals, you'd have been like, oh, I'll do that. But when I'm like, all you got to do is walk down there and do this, you're like, nah, that can't be all I need to do. Right. And it's like, when I heard that one day, I was like, dude, that's exactly what people do with this shit. They're like,
Dude, I love that.
It's like, I need to make this 7 layers of complicated, other than just like, how about we just start getting an account of what you're eating? And then week by week, we'll slowly refine that. Not necessarily reduce, we'll slowly refine or fix it as we go. And people don't want to hear that it's that simple. It has to be more complicated.
Man, what an amazing comparison. And I'll talk about the Old Testament all day. So I love that, man. That was great. I think that's exactly right. Like 100% people do exactly that. They want the more complicated fix. And there's this illusion of complexity that people really do enjoy. Like, oh, if it sounds more complex, then they'll believe in it more. If it sounds too simple, then it's like, it's not as enticing. And for whatever it's worth, that's one aspect of marketing, right?
Sure.
Like, if there's anyone listening who's in marketing, you know very well that in order to sell something, one of the most common things you need is a unique hook. You need something unique that makes it sound exciting, new. And this is why the fitness industry runs in a cyclical fashion. We're hearing about like carnivore now or low carb. Well, it's like, this is just Atkins repurposed. Or this, like every few years we'll see something. My wife is funny. Like, she's very much in like the fashion makeup world. And she was watching something on Instagram the other day and she's like, oh, that's weird. Like, this looks like something that I would have seen like 10 years ago. And I was like, oh, did they bring something back? And she's like, yeah, they're bringing it back. I was like, that's how all this works. They need to lose it for a period of time before they can then bring it back and sell it again. So it can be unique. So if something is just sounding unique for the sake of sounding unique, it's actually easier to sell it than something that sounds ridiculously simple.
And the same goes through for any of like, so separate from nutrition now, talking about fitness, the same thing goes for fitness, right? Back in, I might be off on the times, but in the 80s, it was like, all you need to get in shape is this little Suzanne Summers thing that you squeeze between your legs. And somehow that's also going to train your arms and your whole body will be in shape. Just do that. Yeah. Or it's that simple. Or ride the gazelle, right? And now it's like, it's starting to come back a little bit with better information. But for a while there, it was like, if you are not absolutely dead on the floor, then like you're a bitch. Like you don't even think about getting results unless you're like laying in a pool of your own vomit at the end of the workout. So it was like, you started with this, on one hand, this spectrum of like, just squeeze this ball between your legs. And then the pendulum went all the way over to like, you have to like almost be dying.
Yeah.
So
there's like that no pain, no gain. That was like the whole phrase, like no pain, no gain. And that was a whole, there are different ends of the industry that still promote that stuff, but large scale, it comes and goes in these very like cyclical fashions. It's very interesting. I feel like at this point, you and I have been in the industry long enough where we've seen it all. We've seen the pendulum swing one way, we've seen it swing the other way, and now it's just, we continue to watch it back and forth, and with different messaging and different unique twists on it, but it's still the same message.
So I think one of the things, and that's a good kind of segue into the next point, is that you've done a great job at finding unique ways to market a very mundane message, right? Then, like you're saying, if I'm scrolling through Instagram and I'm like, oh, this guy has this crazy workout and this, this secret diet that he's telling me about, and Jordan's like just doing some deadlifts and presses and eating protein and vegetables, the average person is like, well, this guy's got to be better. But you've done some things, right? And I'll bring them up, that have found better ways to illustrate that you can enjoy things without, and still make progress, right? So I'm referring to eating a Big Mac for how many days was it?
30 days.
30 days. So for context, Jordan ate a Big Mac every day for 30 days, documented the whole process. You can find it on his YouTube, and was still tracking his overall weight. So tell me, like, I think that's a fantastic way of, like, initially I was like, I would do something like that. And then I was like, nah, I'm good. but so take me back to, because that's a very creative way to show people, right? Because that's a little bit of both. It's catchy, right? People see like, this dude's eating a Big Mac every day and he's losing weight. Like, I want to do that. But the message is pure, right? Because that's how I'm going to judge someone. I don't, like, you've done things that are silly. Like, you have characters on your Instagram and stuff that people resonate, right? And like, but why I enjoy it and why I still think it's good is because you can tell that the core message or the intent is good, right? So let's go back to the Big Mac challenge. First of all, how did you feel? Like, you couldn't have felt good doing that.
It was, so I'll start by saying so each Big Mac is like 540 calories, and I'm a small dude again. So there are a couple aspects. My calories to lose weight are pretty low in general, but also in a span of 30 days, I knew, like, if I had quote unquote only lost like 2 pounds in 30 days, a lot of people would have been like, that's nothing.
That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
So I had to be in a pretty significant deficit. I ended up losing 7 pounds in 30 days just to show people, because people think like McDonald's equals poison, McDonald's is bad, like you can't lose weight eating McDonald's. And the whole purpose wasn't to say you should eat McDonald's every day. The whole purpose was to say, like, you can enjoy your favorite foods in moderation and still make progress. So sometimes you have to do something extreme in order to make a simple point. And the reason I'm going to say I didn't feel good mainly because my calories were so low. Like, that was it. It wasn't necessarily because of the Big Mac per se. Dude, and Big Macs are small now. I feel like they used to be way bigger. Like,
if I had to guess, I would have guessed, because I don't know it off the top of my head, I would have guessed over 540. I would have thought over.
Yeah, it's only 540. I mean, it took me like 3.5, 4 bites to finish it. It was not filling. So to have that as a meal, one of my meals every day, it was not fun because I was pretty fucking hungry the whole time. So that's the part right there that I think, sorry to interrupt you, but that's the point that I think the average person is why they don't understand it, because they do see their favorite fitness influencer saying, look, gummy bears, you can eat these. What they don't then do is put up a picture of what they have to eat the rest of the day to make that work. And it's like, no, like, they're like, if I did that, I'd be so full. And it's like, no, you have no idea. Like, you're going to be starving the rest of the day because it's like, it's not nutrient dense. So your body's like, great, those are calories, but I'm still lacking something here. So your hunger, it's not as satiating as you would think. So it's not that you can't,
It's just making it harder because you're making those choices. So, yeah, I think that was a great kind of experiment. Have you gone back? I know it like blew up and people were like challenging you to do it with other foods. Like, did you ever like consider giving it a run with something else?
So I did recently do, because it depends on the trend. There right now there's a huge trend that like you shouldn't be spiking your blood sugar. Like spiking your blood sugar is bad. And so this past it was either August or September. It was August. I spiked my blood sugar every day for 30 days. So I wore one of those continuous glucose monitors, which you don't need to wear unless you're like actually a diabetic. But I got one of those, outrageously expensive, by the way. Got one of those, wore it, and every day I deliberately spiked my blood sugar. So I had donuts one day, I had gummy bears one day. One day I literally had a quarter cup of just pure raw sugar. Just ate the sugar, and that was insane. And I tracked my blood sugar spike. So every day I deliberately spiked it, and I lost 12 pounds over while doing that. People lost their shit with that one. So, and they always lose it. And basically the reason I do this is, again, not to say I want you to eat McDonald's every day. I want you to spike your blood sugar every day. The main reason is because most people, they don't understand research. They don't understand how to read research. And at this point, you could find a research study supporting whatever opinion you want. Especially, I've been playing around with AI a fair bit and Chat GPT, and for a long time, the only people who were able to find research studies were people who understood research. Then once people understood Google a little bit more, then they could search like Google Scholar, whatever, and they could find a study supporting whatever they wanted. Now it's even easier. You can go into Chat GPT and say, find me a research study proving X, Y, and Z, and it will literally give you the link to that study proving whatever you want. So I've been so tired of people just showing studies. I'm like, how about I just show you that you can do this? And then it got to a point where people who were saying, okay, well, fine, it works for you. You're a white male, which is just like apparently a bad thing. So like, they're like, but it wouldn't work with a woman. So then in January, I worked with a Black woman. Her name is Alyssa. She's amazing, who is trying to lose weight so she can have babies, so that because she needs to do IVF. And she's lost like 20 pounds since working with me. And she enjoyed alcohol, and she enjoyed everything that like all of the stuff. And so I like to use real people and real situations to prove it, because it's one thing to say, hey, look at this study. It's another thing to say, watch me or watch Alyssa, watch someone do it in real time. You can't refute the results. So that's why I like doing those challenges.
Yeah, because like the word significant in research, people get caught up on. Significant just means it could be 0.1 pounds difference in a modality. Right. Like people used to get hung up on that with like steady state aerobic stuff versus interval training. And I was like, you need to be doing this. And it's like, the research says it's significantly better. And I'm like, look at this research paper. I'm like, it was it was a 6-month study, and it was a pound of a difference. Right. Divide a pound by however many days are in 6 months. I'm like, is it worth it to you to do that every day and feel like shit for a pound? Like that's significant because everybody in the study experienced that difference, but it's like 1 pound over 6 months. Right. It means nothing to the average person.
Exactly. And if like what happens after that 6 months is over, or you just like, if you're going to stop doing that workout and end up doing nothing at all, I'd like to see what happens over 3 years, 5 years, right? It's like whatever is more sustainable for the individual. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's really what it boils down to.
Yeah. Cause like going back to something you touched on earlier, like when I finished powerlifting, I was lifting at like 198, and then I dieted down to 181 to try to get a different total there. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a bodybuilding show. And in my mind, I was like, you know what? I'm probably I got to lose like another 10 pounds. Like, and then I'll be there. And do you know, not personally, but do you know Shelby Starnes? He used to write for Elite Fitness.
Yeah.
He was my coach for it. And I remember just being like, all right, I probably got to lose like another 10 pounds and I'm going to be shredded. And I was like, I was in the 170s and I was like, oh, this is good. And then I was in the 160s and I was like, I would email him almost like every other day. I'm like, dude, like how much more and he would just respond like a little bit more to go. And by the time when I weighed in, and I'm like 5'9", like, so when I weighed in for that show, I was like 158 pounds. Like I was like painted black, with all the spray paint and all that kind of stuff. But I was like, whoever does this for their entire life, like they have to love it, because if you don't, like, it's a miserable existence. Like I saw no friends. Like by the end of it, I was doing an hour of cardio in the morning, an hour cardio at night.
Yep.
I was having like, some of my meals were down to like 10 grams of carbs per meal. And that was like a spoonful of a sweet potato. And that was like the most exciting thing in the world. So that was not a fun experience. Not good at all. You've done, so like moving into fitness with some of this stuff, like you've done some aggressive things. Like you've competed in powerlifting. You've had a good total at your weight class. You've done other things where you've dieted to be extremely lean. But moving on to where we're at in life now, how has that changed for you? What's your main emphasis now being a dad? So how old is your daughter now? And what's kind of changed with you in that time period?
So she's a year and a half now. I'm just done with saying the months. I got really tired of that. And it's like this many months. I'm like, just tell. She's a year and a half. I just don't give a shit about. And to be fair, like I haven't given a shit about like being shredded for many, many years, but now it's even more pronounced. The idea of being shredded is just so unbelievably unappealing to me at this point, for literally all the things that you just mentioned and more. Like aside from how it makes me feel, I know people, whether they're clients, colleagues, whatever, who are shredded to bits, but like their kids, their young children, watch them struggle with their relationship with food. They watch them have a terrible relationship with food. These people get nervous about having a slice of pizza at their kid's birthday party. These people like it, and even kids are so smart, man. They see everything. You're not hiding it from them. You're not hiding your food fear. They are very well aware of it. And I'm so glad that I don't have food fear and I don't have any of these issues. I used to when I was younger. I'm glad I've gotten over it, because passing it on to your children is a curse. It's just a horrible, horrible, horrible thing to do. So right now, my goal is, for me personally, just feel really good. I have enough strength, and even this is a new thing with my strength training. My strength training for years was just like, got to get stronger, got to get stronger, got to get stronger, lift, 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 lift. Now I'm just like, nah, I just want to feel good. Like, that's really it. Like, I've got enough, it's like, I don't need to be hitting PRs. It's just not a goal of mine anymore. Especially it's weird as I feel like you get older too, because going for a personal record in the gym when I was younger, I could hit a PR. And again, like I have higher strength levels than an average individual. But like when I was younger, I hit a PR and I'd be fine. But now I hit a PR and I'm like, I'm pretty tired the rest of the day. That really zapped me. And I run around with my daughter a lot, and we go to gymnastics, and it's like, if I'm tired from the gym to the point where I can't really give my daughter my best, then what the fuck was the point of the gym? I'm supposed to feel better. I'm not supposed to feel worse from it. So it's at this point, my goal is just to feel good, move well, and be strong and be capable. But that's really it. I'm not trying to set any records or be a world-class athlete.
Yeah, I mean, I only just now have kind of come around to that. My daughter's actually 1 year old today. So today's her birthday. So yeah, awesome. We went to breakfast this morning, party on the weekend. So, and if people think that fitness professionals have it all figured out, I'll say we and they are some of the worst when it comes to
yes,
like, cause you like, when I remember when I was big on, like I would go and travel away to these seminars, and I would show up and be like, man, are we going to grab some beers? And like, there'd be people with like bags of chicken and like pulling broccoli out of their backpack. And I'm like, you guys are a lot of fun. And I was like, now if they had an event or something, yeah, I can come up with some justification, but
even then still sucks.
Yeah.
Even then it's like, what kind of a life is that, dude?
Yeah. And it's usually done as some sort of like badge of honor. Like, It's more of a look
Yes.
at me. It's more of a look at me type of thing than anything else. And it's super unrelatable for the average person. And I think that is what keeps people out of fitness and out of trying to improve themselves, because they
Yep.
see that person and they think that that's what they want to look like, because what else are they going to compare it to? And they're like, well, if that's what it takes, screw it. Like if I
Yeah.
see this guy just going after it in the gym 7 days a week and carrying around buckets of chicken, if that's what it takes to be healthy, I'm not even going to try. Right.
Yeah.
So it's more important, I think, for people to see what real moderation looks like. Right. Because, I think you've also done a good job as the next segue of like handling tough topics. Right.
Mm.
You had a post recently where people asked like, hey, is it possible to be, I might butcher the wording, so you can fix it for me if I do, but hey, is it possible to be healthy and be obese?
Yep.
And I have my own opinions, but I thought your answer was, I hadn't heard that it answered that way before. And I thought it was great. So go ahead. Like what your opinion on that? Because I think there's a line, right? It can't be carry around buckets of chicken and work out 7 days a week, but we also can't be so accepting where it's like, it's okay. Don't worry about anything. Right.
Correct.
Like, so I thought your answer was great.
Yeah. I mean, I think here, in terms of being accepting, I think a lot of people have this idea that, well, if someone is struggling with something, I don't want to hurt their feelings, so I'm just going to say that it's okay. But sometimes not worrying about hurting their feelings is actually going to hurt their health. And if you really care and love about someone, you're going to say the hard things. It's like one of the things that when it comes to a marriage, I've always, and even a friendship, for example, if someone says that they have a really good marriage or really good friendship, they always say, this person makes me a better person. Right. And so, but for some reason, we're in this weird time in society where people, oh, you're perfect as you are. No, you're not. No, I'm not. Like none of us are perfect. And the people who we love and adore the most push us to be better. So that, I think the idea of not wanting to hurt people's feelings, I know it comes from a good place, but sometimes we got to say some hard shit to make them so they know that like there's a real issue and they know that we're there and we support them. You don't have to be a dick about it. You shouldn't be a dick about it, but you have to bring up difficult topics because you know that they need to hear it. So with that in mind, the answer that I gave was, listen, at any point in time, if we're assessing someone's health, usually what we'll do is we'll look at their blood pressure, we'll look at their blood work. Like these are how you actually gauge someone's health. You can't just gauge their health simply based on weight, but different blood markers, your blood pressure, these are your vitals. These are things that give us a snapshot of your health right now. And if someone is obese, and obese being having a significantly high body fat percentage, not the rare individual who is so muscular that they're classified as obese. I mean, significantly high body fat percentage. They might be able to present as healthy in this moment at a snapshot in this moment. The question is, what happens from the stress that excess body fat and the lifestyle that accompanies that? What happens over 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years? You can be healthy now, but staying healthy becomes exponentially more difficult and far less likely because of this challenges that come with that excess body fat. So oftentimes far less movement, joint pain leading to less movement, mental and emotional distress, oftentimes leading to not going out in public, not hanging out with people, worse food choices. Like the lifestyle that accompanies that what will lead to health deteriorating over the long term. And the way that I think about it is, how many very, very overweight people have you seen that are also 80, 90 plus? How many times have you seen someone who's super old and also super fat? I can't think of any. Like all of the super, super, super old people I know are relatively lean and oftentimes smaller individuals. And that's not a mistake. It's either because someone who was really big ended up losing weight and got to a lower weight, or they died off. And it's a really important thing to realize, like you might be able to be healthy now, but in 5, 10, 15 plus years, it's not going to go the way that you want.
Yeah. And I think that was the perfect explanation I have, is because you're taking a picture of something that's moving. It's moving towards this destination. It's not there yet. And
Yes.
you're going to take a picture right now and pretend that that's where it's staying.
Correct.
Right? And for all those other reasons that you mentioned, it becomes incredibly hard to make that work and do that. So what was it? Did you get a lot of, I don't, I try not to spend a lot of time in the comments. But did you get a lot of negative? Like, how was that received?
Overwhelmingly positive, but I lost a couple thousand followers from it. So like, uh, it's funny. It's a lot of people, but percentage wise, it's still a very small percentage of my audience. What was interesting to me was the people who got upset about it, like they got really upset about it. Um, what most of them were really upset about was actually when I discussed the BMI, because that was the other aspect of the post, where basically a lot of people hate on the BMI. I actually really like it. I think it's a very useful tool. And for some reason right now, people demonize the BMI, saying it's racist, which is wild to me that people will say that. And so they'll say that it's racist, and but their reasoning is because the studies were originally done on white people. But it's like, okay, so we can look at a lot of studies that were originally done on either just white people or just Asian people or just black people. It's like, those aren't racist. That's just what they had at that initial study. And we have a lot more data now. So
yeah, I mean, there's body comp studies on like Hispanic boxers. Like, it's
right.
not like, it's like, it's what they pick.
So people will demonize it. And again, I think it's because they're taking it and it's hurting their feelings. But it's like, we're not trying to hurt your feelings. We're just discussing scientific facts. It's nothing against you. And so in my post, I said, listen, a lot of people hate on the BMI, and it's definitely, there are flaws to it. It's not perfect, but it's a pretty damn good tool for the general population. If you're an elite level bodybuilder or a high level bodybuilder, or even just like an above average lifter, it might not be the best tool for you. But most people are not an above average lifter. Most people are the average population. So for the average population, it actually works really well. And another topic, I actually had a number of cardiologists reach out in support of what I was saying. And they were saying, by the way, even for the above average lifter, for whatever it's worth, yes, it's better for their health that they have more muscle and less fat, but mass is mass. And when you're putting stress on your heart, like, this is why some of like the biggest, strongest, especially dudes, like, they generally have a shorter lifespan, because the extra mass that they're putting on is very difficult for their heart. And so it's like, even the BMI, well, you can't differentiate necessarily between muscle and fat. Muscle, if in excess, especially supraphysiological doses, when people are taking anabolic steroids, can also be very difficult on your heart. So it's something that's worth considering.
Yeah, and to get on that topic of that is like, that became very popular for a while, talking about drugs. It was like, everybody was like, well, you just don't know how to do drugs the way that I do them. The way I do them, the way I do drugs is healthy. And then like 10 years later, they die, and it's just sad. It's terrible. But like, that was always the message. It's like, no, they're not bad as long as you do them my way. And it's like, and then they needed like a triple bypass. And then so like, it's like, yeah, no, they're like, these things, they're, science can always be improved, but for the most part, like, these numbers came from somewhere. They're not just made up out of thin air.
Yeah. 100%, man. It's the Wild West out there, and anyone can say anything and make it sound scientific. Doesn't mean they're right.
Yeah. So I think, man, dude, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. We've been on for about an hour. I think we covered a lot of great topics. I think this will be super helpful for the audience to kind of listen, get some perspective on some things. Thank you so much for doing this. What do you got up for the rest of the day?
I got a couple calls hanging. My daughter's taking a nap right now. Get a little workout in. I'm really trying to get my splits, man. So
like I said, I've been off Instagram, but I do remember the last time I was on that you were getting kind of close.
Yeah, man. So, dude, it's actually really fun. And not to go off on another tangent, I'll stay on for however long you want, but it's a unique side of training that I haven't spent much time in prior to this. And I started about 4 or 5 months ago. I dabbled in it a few years ago, ended up hurting my knee. And that was because I think I took a not the best approach. Now it's a much more safe and structured approach. And it's just fun to try new styles of training. It's also pretty wild because when most people hear about getting the splits or stretching, they just think of long duration, boring, painful, static stretching. Dude, I would say 88% of my training is like very challenging strength-based work, and a very small percentage of it is the longer duration static work. But even that's only like 2 to 3 minutes of some holds. The vast majority is like loaded stretching or like very intense, like long eccentric movements that lengthen the muscle. And it's devastatingly painful and brutal, but it's very fun to learn this new side of training. And it's been impacting my jujitsu incredibly as well, because these longer duration holds, very eccentric, heavy, loaded stretching stuff is carrying over a lot to my sports performance. So it's fun.
Yeah, I remember I was at a seminar with Charlie Weingroff, and he was going through some of the old Pavel like clasp knife, like very, very aggressive, like contract, relax, like,
Yes.
and it was miserable. And I was like, this is like, because if you're trying to change something like that, it's not just like, oh, you just bend over a little bit and yeah, everything will loosen up. Like this is like a physiological process. If we're trying to actually change this, it does nothing like that happens easily, right? You just don't you don't deadlift 500, 600 by accident. It takes a lot of
Correct.
work and straining. So if you think that you're going to change any of these positions with just like, I just, ease into it. And I think I messaged you at one point. Like I remember seeing like in all of like the Jean-Claude Van Damme stuff, like he's never like on top of anything. Right.
Yes.
He's always like pushing out against something.
Yes.
I think that you could probably find it. Like, I think they call it like a Van Damme lift, right? Like when you're in a split and you just pick up like a kettlebell or whatever.
Yep. I really want to do that. I want to get to the point where I can have my splits out to the side, my feet up on chairs, and like hold my daughter. Like that's the picture that I'm shooting for. Like when I get that, I'll be good. That's like literally my motivation in my head. I want that, because I feel like as my daughter gets older, that'd be a picture that like she'd be really happy to have. Like that's literally why I want to do this.
Yeah. I would love to say that I was going to join you on that, but I think I'm going to, my hips might rip apart. Like I think most males in my family have had not either one or multiple hip replacements.
Oh,
so like now that's more of the reason why I probably should be doing it. And different ways. But yeah, that's my initial kind of hesitation. But how long have you been working on it? Like 6 or 8 months, you said?
I started it was either November, December. So we'll say December, January, February, March. So actually, no, it's longer than that. So it must have been November. So about 4 or 5 months now is when I restarted. I'm almost at the front splits. It's funny. I thought the front splits were going to be the hardest. It's the side, like the middle splits, that are the most difficult. And I didn't really realize that. Those are devastating.
Going out to the side, you mean?
Yeah, with my either foot on either side. The front splits, apparently, and the more I researched this, the more I found it, the front splits are one of the easiest ones to get, which I didn't expect. I thought the front splits were going to be the most difficult from the hamstring perspective on the front leg. For me, it's been the hip flexor on the back leg that's been the most difficult. And
yeah, I remember we used to play around with like putting a foam roller underneath or in between you, and you can like hold yourself up in that position. I remember those are brutal.
Dude, it's absolutely devastating, but it's also really fun. It's fun. And again, at this point in my career, when I'm not really chasing personal records, it's fun to be a beginner in something. It's fun to be a complete beginner, learning from scratch. Like with strength training, it's once you learn it, it's like, all right, like
it's only so exciting. A dumbbell row is like, it's like
exactly.
At some point, or like what you were talking about before, like with the strength training, it's like, I don't have a training partners anymore. So like, I don't even want to load, like if I'm going to deadlift, I don't even want to load the plates. I'm like, I'm going to do something else. I'm like, this is too much. This is annoying.
Yeah.
And like that being a beginner thing was interesting too. It was like, there were times like when I did that little short stint into like a extremely amateur little bodybuilding. Again, when you think bodybuilder, you don't think 157 pounds. So this was not, this was not setting the world on fire. But I was like, dude, I would rather put the briefs on, put the canvas suit on, and squat 700 pounds than do these calf raises. I was like, this is absolutely miserable. Like the way that this feels. Like I would rather just, because it was like with powerlifting, it was like, I tried it. It didn't, I'm done. Right? It didn't work, or it did work and it was yours is over.
Right.
Like putting yourself through these, like holding that position for 2 or 3 minutes has got to be sucks. Yeah. But I could see it being very helpful for jujitsu and things like that. Like I've gone through like, I went to one of Dre's courses for functional range conditioning. I found some of the applications for the kin stretch and stuff like that to be helpful. But those guys are freaks. Like I have a picture from that seminar of like the guy Dre standing in the front of the room and his one leg is planted and he's turned around and faced the whole other way. Right. So his one leg is facing one way and his other leg's facing the other. He's like a G.I. Joe, like where you can just like spin the leg, spin the leg around. It's crazy. Like in wrestling now too, like those kids need it because like there's nothing physically healthy about like, hey, I'm going to grab your ankle. And then what you're going to do is you're going to 360 spin as fast as you can while I'm locked on your ankle and try to grab mine. And it's like these kids, I mean, I'm sure there's always been a ton of injuries and physicality in wrestling. That's not new, but the amount of like knee injuries and ligament injuries, because now that type of scrambling, that type of wrestling has, once people found out like it works, well, now everybody does that. And they're like literally sticking their ankle in concrete and then spinning as fast as they can. And like, they're just ripping their knees apart. So the more they could build that up, would be beneficial. You're not preventing anything, but you can give yourself a better shot.
Dude, watching those videos, I get nauseous. I'm like, how in the hell did that knee not just absolutely explode? I'm very excited to see. I'm excited to see these people, especially like with these insane ranges that they've developed, how they do as they get older. Like, will it be beneficial for them? Will it potentially hurt? Like, I'm just excited to watch. And like, so I'm trying to improve that as well. It's just, I don't know of any research on people who've developed these insane ranges of motion within their joints. It'd be very interesting to see, right? So like, I'm very excited to watch and to grow, and I'm trying to improve that as well. But you just never know, right? We just don't know. Like, is there a point at which it's too much? It's excessive. Do you put too much stress on the joint? I have no fucking clue. But like,
when we start chasing targets for other reasons, we never know what the ramifications of that are, right? Like. Right. It's just like, there's no difference in baseball. Hey, spin rate looks like it's important. Well, let's chase that. It's like, all right, well, now everybody's elbows are,
exactly.
Eric could comment more than I could on something like that. But it's like, we chase this one variable and now 100 other things break. And then we have to go back and fix that and kind of go forward from there.
Yeah. But man, thank you. This has been wonderful. I appreciate you. If you're ever in Dallas, please let me know. Happy birthday to your daughter. That's super exciting.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. When's your second due?
August. So my wife's birthday is in August. This girl, God willing, be due in August. My daughter's birthday is in August. Our anniversary is in August. I'm going to be freaking out every August.
Do you have another like secret name picked out? Like, what are you going to use for?
We're thinking about it. I've actually, it's been a big topic of conversation. So I don't know yet. If you have any ideas, I'm very open to hearing them.
I'll give it some thought. I don't know if this will make the recording, but his daughter on Instagram goes by the name of Old Abe to keep her anonymity. So I was wondering if you had another name queued up for that. But Jordan, awesome time, man. I think we covered a lot of great content. Interesting to catch up, hear how you're adjusting to being a dad. I know you're a super busy dude, so I really appreciate you coming on here and spending some time with us.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.